Welcome back, everyone. Over to you, Brian.
All right. Thanks so much. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today for this session. And thanks to Henry Stewart for putting on this Festival of Damn and for having us here today. So what we're going to talk about today is the 15 metrics most critical for digital asset management success. But first, just a quick introduction of myself. So my name is Brian Kavanaugh, and I am the Director of Global Field and Customer Marketing here at Bynder. So we're proud to be a sponsor of the Festival of Damn and of a lot of Henry Stewart's events in person throughout this past year and into next year. So if you've been to any of them in person, we've likely seen you and hopefully see you again real soon. And for those of you that don't know us, our story very quickly is as the leading digital asset management platform. These are a couple of things that we see, and the presentation is not about this, but this just kind of tells our story in a nutshell, right? We see a world of proliferating content, as I'm sure you as content practitioners and DAM practitioners do as well. We also see the strategic advantage and the importance of great content experiences and the role that they play in differentiating a brand, driving new sales, building a customer community, or any other strategic objective that you might have looking into 2023. And we believe that every brand can unite, create, and thrive with the best-in-breed digital asset management platform. And part of that is these 15 metrics that the title suggests and that we've put together for you here today. And when we put these together and when we look at, okay, well, what are the metrics that define success? Well, first of all, what does success mean? And success simply means that the DAM is playing a critical role at your organization, driving business objectives, right? Which can mean a lot of things, but that would be the high-level definition. Then when we think about metrics, the metrics are either indicative of that, or the metrics are when I say indicative, I mean maybe you presenting to a group of stakeholders at the executive level, or they're sort of a health check or a pulse check. Well, how good is it really doing? And that might be more for the admins or those who are most closely associated with the DAM. And they tend to fall along these three large categories within this framework that you're probably familiar with if you're, been working in the DAM space, which is create, manage, and distribute. And perhaps there are more subcategories we could put into that, but it really is these three main categories that spell out the asset lifecycle that the metrics I'm going to share all fall into. So think of that as the frame. Think of that as the three main buckets that you can put these metrics into, and we'll take it from there. So the first, we'll start off with create at the beginning of the content lifecycle. Our number one metric would be requests. So, we see a ton of value in actually tracking the volume of all of the creative requests and the requests for new content that are coming in. And what that does is that gives you a sense of the workload that a individual or a team has within a given time frame, which also cascades likely to how overworked might they be or stressed out might they be, which because we hear a lot that creative teams are stressed. And it's only by quantifying that you're able to maybe make decisions based on that quantification. Similarly, when the project is complete, we also see that tracking projects completed is a great way to provide a benchmark for what is being done within what time frame, and is that reasonable? Are you resourced for it? And do you want to increase that into the future? Well, how do you plan on doing that? Is it gaining efficiency with the resources you already have? Or is this your chance to make the case for additional resources because you're showcasing that you're continuously completing more projects that are being requested? And also, what type of projects? Are they strategic projects and ones that you had thought you'd create? Or is it a lot of ad hoc? Because that might be one way of showing that you might need to steer in a new direction, or perhaps the DAM might not even be doing its job of enabling the self-serve of all the assets that you already have, if too many of these projects are more duplicate content or requests. A couple other on this theme, well, one would be time to complete any task or any project. That is something I know that a lot of well-oiled creative teams are very proud of, right? And they have it subcategorized by the type of work they're doing. So they say, oh, it takes us 2 hours to turn around a banner ad request, or it might take us a day to get a new one-pager out the door, or a certain amount of hours, right? And having that sense based on all the intake and what is in your creative workflows is a great way to gain efficiencies. And we all know that that's a little bit top of mind right now. and also a way to continuously showcase the work that's being done and also keep your team in check, because what if those numbers get out of whack, right? What if you're accustomed to completing a certain type of task in 3 hours, then all of a sudden the average spikes up to 5 or something, for example. Similarly would be time to market. Now, this is a little bit more broad, or more stakeholders are going to care about the overall time to market, but it follows those same principles. It's something that a lot of teams standardize at the marketing level or the go-to-market level, and the creative team have a huge impact on that, or it's the time to creation that then will dictate what is the overall time to market across the life cycle, right? Even though it does have some downstream implications. Then the last one in this category would be the cost of creation. Now we could do a whole session just on this, right? But in short, it's a lot of the costs that are heading sort of outside your own organization, which might be freelancers, agency, monthly fees, as well as one-off production costs, renting an external studio, hiring a videographer, and talent involved, as well as, of course, your in-house hours or the resources that you're tracking. And what we see, in order to make some of those other metrics work, time to complete or requests fulfilled, sometimes the costs go way up, right? And so part of the exercise here, or the success of a DAM platform, is keeping a cost under control. In this case, cost to create. And we have 2 more as we sort of progress through this. Okay, let's take a quick breath, and then let's move on to the next stage of the life cycle, which would be manage. Oh, number 6, users and logins. So when I say logins, I mean, of course, anybody can have users, but do you feel good about knowing that consistently the majority of them are logging in and logging in consistently? And that represents adoption, stickiness, and scale. And ideally, it's at the enterprise level, right? It's not just a handful of users from one business unit or one team. If the goal is to make this the system of record, single source of truth, then the users and as well as your logins on a monthly basis should reflect that. Similarly, look at the assets themselves, right? It's kind of funny to have this as one of the metrics, because that's sort of what this is all about. But volume of assets is really important. And there's a couple things that I tend to look at here. We hear it from customers as a progression. Let's say they start off talking to us or bringing on their new DAM platform in Bynder with 20,000 assets. But realistically, they think 25% of them are just duplicates or off-brand material, and that's part of the reason they need a DAM, right? It's because they have a lot of assets, but they're siloed and unusable. So maybe that gets trimmed down to 15,000. So now they're saying, okay, we started with 15,000. What you do then is you track the growth of that number from 15,000, perhaps every quarter, every half year, or every year. And is that in line with the business objectives and what else is going on at the company, right? Are those types of assets the ones that you had set out to create, or is there any misalignment there? And does that cascade to the downstream implications of, okay, what are our key channels? How are we pushing content out for our objectives of customer acquisition or loyalty or anything else? The asset growth should reflect that. And ideally, again, within the DAM, it's not just a functional team, such as the creative team pushing assets out to the web team, but it's enterprise-wide, and it's covering a variety of use cases. And that's where that asset growth really tells a nice story. Views and downloads on a similar theme. This, of course, is ensuring that the assets are being consumed as intended, right? And that just does not only apply internally, that is for the entire collaborator network. Collaborator network is just the sort of overarching concept of you take your in-house team, take your agencies, then of course all the retailers, partners, and everyone else that needs to use assets on your behalf. Are they also viewing and downloading based on the credentials you've given them, or the sort of collections you set up or anything like that? Great way to keep your resellers and partners in check. If they're complaining, hey, you don't support us enough, you can say, hey, I see that you haven't logged in, viewed, or downloaded any of the assets we put out in the latest collection. Searches is an interesting one, because it's like you want to make sure that the platform is being used. And we all know that in this day and age, it's a lot of times discovery of assets happens via search. But then also, if you know what the most recurring search terms are, if they line up with the themes of assets you're creating, you should feel good about that. But every once in a while, there will be a most recurring term that is not something that you are creating, and you know that it's being searched for and not found, that's a great thing to bring back to the content team, or at least find out where is that coming from. Is it coming from sales, coming from a particular region or group? Why is this being searched? Is there some sort of business need here that we could potentially send back upstream to fulfill, make sure that next time someone searches for it, they actually find it? Okay, so the next one is languages. And so this, of course, applies to enterprise organizations operating at a global level. But more and more, every business is global in a sense, right? Because the barrier to entry to do business in multiple languages across multiple geographies has gotten lower, just given the proliferation of digital, being able, with the sort of global economy and everything else. But so if you are operating in multiple languages, you're going to want those to be reflected in the DAM, right? Or else there's a natural silo that exists, or natural inefficiency happening where perhaps your assets are only in English in the DAM, but then you actually know that you are marketing and selling in 4 other languages, right? And then once you get the all the languages into the DAM and reflected in your assets themselves, but also your taxonomy perhaps, or how different groups are logging in and finding what they need based on permissions. Now that spells an added level of complexity, and therefore it becomes more critical to the business. But of course, you're going to want to make sure that it's properly set up, and also can take on more languages in the future. Because if you've expanded to one region or several regions in the past couple of years, chances are you'll be expanding to additional regions in the years to come, and the DAM's got to be set up for that. Okay, and the last one on the manage stage would be the cost to manage. And there's a lot that goes into this, right? With any DAM platform, the cost to manage it is the annual fee, right? Or the sort of contract that you have with your DAM provider. And usually that does include some sort of service or support package, meaning it's not additional to get the consultation or the management, unless that's finally outlined, or you need to add something as a one-off that happens. But where costs can get out of control is if there are multiple DAMs in place in different areas of the business. So of course, could you get away with one? And the answer is typically yes, if you scope it out right. But if you've got multiple, that's multiple subscription fees. And the other real challenge that we hear sometimes is if the DAM is not properly set up and implemented, then there is typically some sort of developer cost, could be third party, or it could be having to hire that role that just has to maintain it, because the admins can't even make all the changes that they're hoping to make, right? And so that's one challenge, and that's how costs can get out of whack. And another area of costs when it comes to the management of assets would be that there actually is duplication taking place. And so that can happen if there isn't a global enterprise view or that system of record. If the DAM in place, or the systems that are sort of pretending to be DAMs, are siloed to channels or regions, because what we hear again and again is that there's actually a duplication happening, or there's 8 global photo shoots happening when realistically you could get away with 1, and then just push all of those global assets out to the 8 regions that need them to then further fine tune and localize, right? We've actually heard a lot of those examples where you can just cut those regional costs, take them off the table, consider it a global cost, and all of a sudden you're operating in a lot more efficient manner, purely around the management. And it does have to do a little bit of the creation side too, right? A photo shoot is a creative exercise, sort of what I alluded to in the previous section, but none of these are completely mutually exclusive, right? If you're creating the assets in silos, chances are you're managing them in silos as well. So there's a ton here having to do with the pure cost of managing assets. Notice we haven't even mentioned here if there are inefficiencies in place with end users unable to find assets because it's not set up properly. Of course, there's a time cost associated with that is just sort of hidden in all this. So again, the sign of a great DAM platform is keeping all of these costs under control, and ideally avoiding a lot of them entirely, right? The cost should just be that annual contract, and then all of a sudden you have like sort of 1 sense of the cost versus the return. Okay, another deep breath, and we're on to our final section, which is the distribute side. So think of, the assets are now in the DAM. Now it's time for them to get pushed out to customer-facing platforms for those exceptional content experiences that we talk about at Bynder. So the first one here would be API calls. So this is something a lot of our customers are tracking, and it's really interesting because what that speaks to is now you're achieving scale because you're continuously increasing the number of API calls being placed on your DAM platform from all the downstream platforms that need those assets. And it guarantees you've got brand consistency because all of the assets within the DAM that are properly tagged and the right version you can guarantee they're being used by the downstream platforms that are more customer facing, right? And the governance is also a big piece of that in terms of usage rights, or especially if you've got some sensitive content or high profile content with usage rights attached. And again, when you have that in place, or you're able to push out to multiple platforms from that central source, that is kind of what we refer to when we use the term scale, right? Scale just means getting more with the same. Similarly, transformations. So transformations is a newer concept to DAM, and one that we've pioneered over the last year or two. And what we mean by this, and when we track transformations, is every single iteration or variation that is created for a specific channel, a specific device, or a specific platform. And ideally, they're happening automatically at some stage within the management side that then cascades to distribution. That could be a derivative, as it's sometimes called in DAM, right? Meaning it's a preset sort of version that is a web version or set to Facebook or anything else. But it could also happen on the fly. And that is when you really get that sense of scale and automation of it's not even any work on anyone's part to get it to that size and dimension. The DAM automatically knows because it's talking via the API with whatever the downstream platform is. And it even recognizes the device and the focus point. Really interesting. And again, what does that represent? Well, of course, it represents the optimal customer experience because the page load speed is improved, which I'll get to. And they're seeing the asset in exactly the right dimension they're supposed to be. But it's also zero time on the web content managers and the developer side, on the IT side, actually setting all of that up. And speaking of page load speed, website performance, even though this might be a little bit downstream from the traditional notion of DAM and what you can track in DAM, is directly related to the success of a DAM that's in place at an organization. And it tends to be, it's not limited to these metrics, but we tend to hear these the most, right? Search engine optimization, because the website is optimized for the experience. It doesn't have heavy images on it. It's got web ready images. It's mobile optimized, again, which is sort of dictated by page load speed. Click-through rates, because the content is relevant and it's in exactly the right dimension and format that it should be, as well as any A/B testing, because you've got more assets at the ready and you're able to come to a quicker conclusion with your own data that, oh, this green one works better than this blue one, right? Now we're going to go with the green one. And so this website performance, given how websites are so critical now, regardless of if it's e-commerce or just a sort of customer-facing website that doesn't have e-commerce, you can actually draw a direct connection to the assets and therefore the DAM. Then the last one is top line revenue, right? The sort of overarching metric that so many teams in creative and marketing, brand and digital are sort of striving towards. We actually see a lot of our customers draw this direct connection to top line revenue, and it happens in a couple ways, right? E-commerce, because the product detail page is more robust and compelling and they've got more new assets at the ready. Could be the channel revenue, such as your distributor channel or your partner network, or revenue from a specific digital channel, such as email, if you're increasing your customer loyalty based on better email programs. Or it could be offline sales. We've actually heard a number of brands that consider the digital experience or the customer experience online as the lead up to when they visit the dealership to make a big ticket purchase. And they already know with 100% certainty they're going with that brand, that model, not the competitor that's right next to it and similarly priced, right? So that's the connection that we see from these content experiences to top line revenue. And it can be very impactful when you sort of ladder all these other metrics on top of that and tell the story with the numbers across that life cycle, right? So in sum, and in recap, these were the 15 that we think and we see again and again be the most critical in terms of the success of your digital asset management deployment. It tends to fall into these three buckets, right? I alluded to the fact that not all of these are mutually exclusive, especially when it comes to the cost. You can sort of associate the costs as a sum up of these, but you can also pinpoint that there are certain efficiencies that can be had or costs kept under control that can be more readily defined as one of these three. And that's helpful because typically when you look at these three buckets, it's different teams needing to work together on them. So maybe that helps define a little bit better who should be focused on what. So with that, I'll wrap up and I'll just say thanks, so much for listening to us. Thank you to the Henry Stewart team for putting this on. It's been a lot of fun thinking through all of this with you all. And again, the conversation doesn't end here, right? I said before, a lot of you probably know us. And if you don't, we'd love to see you soon. But please keep the conversation going in our digital booth or on any of the Bynder channels and properties that you tend to engage with. Thanks so much.